Once you've been slotted as a tag team wrestler, it can be very hard to break out of that mold and build a successful singles career for yourself. And this is especially hard when you're already a part of arguably the most decorated and beloved tag team of your generation. That's what makes Bubba Ray Dudley's journey so fascinating then, because not only did he have that hugely successful run in the 90s and 2000s, but he was then able to transition into arguably just as successful a singles run, becoming one of the best heels in the industry for a time as he dominated TNA during the second half of his career. But which was the better half, and how did the transition come about? Well, join us today as we answer these questions and more by taking a deep dive into his entire career journey in Get the Tables, the Bubba Ray Dudley Story. Mark LaMonaco was born in Queens, New York on July 14, 1971 into an Italian-American family who would, after a few years of staying there, pick up shop and move both him and his brother over to the more affluent area of Dix Hills in Long Island, where they would spend the rest of their childhood. And it was there, while studying at Half Hollow Hills East High School, that Mark would become a star member of the track team. But that said, this wouldn't be his main passion going forward, as he had, like pretty much everyone else we've covered on this channel, become a huge fan of pro wrestling during his formative years. This being enough for him to seek out training for himself in 1991, not long after graduating, where he would study under the tutelage of Johnny Rodz before making his in-ring debut later that year as Mongo Vile, a biker character that was heavily inspired by the likes of the Road Warriors and the Nasty Boys. And for the next 4 years, it would be this gimmick that the rookie worked under as he moved around the tri-state area indie circuit, honing his craft everywhere he went as he awaited his big break. A break that would eventually come in the form of Paul Heyman. Yes, by 1995, Heyman had taken control of Eastern Championship Wrestling and subsequently rechristened it to Extreme Championship Wrestling, with the young promoter intent on turning it into the industry's equivalent of Nirvana, a counterculture phenomenon that would give new life to an often stagnant product. And this of course worked, as over the next few years, with Mark as one of its key players, ECW would become just what it set out to be, revitalizing the wrestling industry and heavily inspiring the Attitude Era that was just on around the corner. Initially, the Queens boy had been brought in there as Mongo, the bodyguard of Bill Alfonso, but after quickly becoming enamored with him, Heyman decided to change his gimmick up by likes of Dances with Dudley, Big Dick Dudley, Sign Guy Dudley, Dudley, and of course, Devon and Spike Dudley. The newcomer's role in the stable would soon be established as Bubba Ray Dudley, a stuttering redneck who initially played into the early comedy leanings of the group, that was, until Devon decided to refocus their efforts into being a more serious threat, with him from there whittling the whole thing down to just him and Bubba, as with the quintessential stud muffin Joel Gertner by their side, they became the most feared tag team in the company, winning the tag titles a record 8 times over the next 4 years as they went through units such as the Public Enemy, the Eliminators, and the Gangstas. On top of this, at this time, Bubba Ray Dudley in particular became known for his brutal promos, which would draw absolutely nuclear heat from fans every week, goading them to the point of near riot on more than one occasion as he spewed the kind of vitriol which we can't repeat here on this channel. Come 1999, however, with the financial difficulties ECW was finding themselves in as a result of mismanagement, as well as many of their ideas and talent having been poached away by WWE and WCW, the party was just about over. That was why, after more than a few bounced checks had come their way, Bubba and Devon were forced to start listening to offers from other places, with them eventually settling on signing with Vince McMahon's promotion later that year. And that was how, in September of '99, they would officially jump, with them from there quickly setting about establishing themselves to a new audience. Of course, there were some growing pains with this at first, but over time, they were able to prove to everyone watching that they belonged in this new league, as they started working their way through the tag division there, picking up numerous wins just as WWE was morphing into a new era, an era that would be helmed by the Dudleys, the Hardys, and Edge and Christian. Yes, we've already done videos on all 4 members of the latter 2 teams elsewhere on this channel, but without repeating ourselves too much, this period redefined what tag team wrestling could be, as all 3 units had a series of stellar matches together, most notably their tables, ladders, and chairs bouts at SummerSlam 2000 and WrestleMania 17, which still hold up as absolute classics to this day, and helped to prove that tag team wrestling could be main event worthy. By this point then, with the success of these matches, it wasn't long before the Dudleys were starting to get some cheers from the audience. So, in an attempt to counteract this, Bubba added a new wrinkle to his character, which saw him start to become fixated on many of the women on the roster, often with the ultimate goal of powerbombing them through a table, a weapon that had by then become the team's signature. But despite this clearly being a heel move, the bloodthirsty Attitude fans continued to cheer for them regardless, with Bubba's calls of "Devon, get the tables!" often drawing huge pops from crowds. With that in mind then, the company finally caved and turned them babyface in early 2000 as they, from there, added a third member to their team in the form of their brother Spike. This babyface run would only prove to be short-lived though, as when WWE was invaded by an alliance of WCW and ECW in 2001, the ECW originals kept up their old allegiances, turning heel once more as they set about trying to destroy Vince McMahon's company once and for all. Now, of course, the invasion angle has since been remembered as arguably the biggest missed opportunity in wrestling history and really deserves a video of its own to explain it all, but it did have some silver linings as, come the end of it, Bubba Ray and Devon would have unified the WWE and WCW tag team titles, this making them the only duo to have held tag belts in all three promotions. And given they were in possession of these when Vince McMahon's company finally defeated the invading forces, they were able to keep their jobs as a result. Though, by this point, there was already a feeling that there was potential in a singles run for the boy from Queens, this being what led to the duo being split up during the company's inaugural draft in May of 2002, as he went solo on Raw. And during this period, Bubba Ray did have some success, winning the Hardcore title on multiple occasions and even at one point getting to challenge Triple H for the World Heavyweight belt. Despite his potential being clear, at the Survivor Series pay-per-view, the Dudleys were reunited once more, as they continued to dominate the Red Brand's tag division over the next 3 years, picking up multiple title wins in the process. Come March of 2004 though, there would be more changes when they were drafted over to SmackDown, where they would turn heel once more after realigning themselves with their old boss and by then SmackDown general manager Paul Heyman. This period saw the duo win gold over on the Blue brand too, and even at one point get into a main event program with The Undertaker, one which would end with the Dead Man's manager Paul Bearer being written off of TV after getting buried in cement. And when, in June of 2005, the ECW brand was revived for the One Night Stand pay-per-view, Bubba and Devon would be right there front and center as well, beating Tommy Dreamer and the Sandman at that show's main event after driving the former through a flaming table. Of course, after the success of this show and their great run on SmackDown, it was expected that the Dudleys would remain with WWE for some time. But, in a move that surprised many, they ended up announcing their exit from the company the following month, this coming after they'd neglected to sign a new contract following a lowball offer from Vince McMahon. Initially, they'd planned to take the Dudley name, which they were under the impression that they owned the rights to, out onto the indie circuit with them, but as it turned out, Paul Heyman, who had assured them that they owned those rights years prior, hadn't exactly been truthful, and it was in fact WWE who held the trademarks following their purchase of ECW in 2001. So with this in mind then, the duo were forced to come up with something new, with them eventually settling on Team 3D, this being a reference to their devastating finishing move, the Dudley Death Drop. Not long after that, and they would make their debut with Total Nonstop Action Wrestling, first appearing there on October 1st of that year, as they quickly set about establishing themselves as the top dogs in this new promotion. This would see Brother Ray and Brother Devon, as they were now known, going after the NWA Tag Team titles repeatedly over the next couple of years, with them at one point even bringing in their kayfabe brother Spike, now being called Brother Runt, to help them. And finally then, after a number of missed opportunities, they were able to win the NWA Tag titles from LAX at April 15, 2007's Lockdown pay-per-view, this marking the fourth major promotion they'd held Tag Team Gold for. Soon after this, and they'd even get a fifth honor in this impressive record, as the NWA would sever ties with TNA, this leading to Team 3D being stripped of the latter promotion's belts and being crowned the inaugural TNA Tag Team Champions instead. From there, they would defend those belts against all comers for the next couple of months until they lost them to Kurt Angle and Samoa Joe, with Ray and Devon spending the next couple of years after that trying to work their way back up the ranks with the ultimate goal of getting another shot at the prize. This period also saw them go up against teams like the Motor City Machine Guns, Christian Cage and Rhino, and Matt Morgan and Abyss, more often than not picking up the win as they continued to get closer to the belts they'd once held. Before they'd get them though, they'd managed to win championship gold in a 6th promotion when they appeared at Wrestle Kingdom 3 to take on Togi Makabe and Toru Yano, defeating the New Japan stalwarts to win the IWGP Tag Team titles. And soon after this, they would become TNA Tag Team Champions for a second time too, after beating Beer Money at Lockdown 2009, with them from there defending both simultaneously on each side of the Pacific as they proved to be the most dominant team on either continent for a while. And while they would eventually drop the TNA tag titles back to Beer Money before the year's end, they would continue to reign as the IWGP Tag Team Champs for a while yet, turning heel once more as they aligned themselves with former ECW cohort Rhino and mowing through babyface after babyface on the roster. Even when they did eventually lose their Eastern Gold to Tetsuya Naito and Yujiro Takahashi at Wrestle Kingdom 4, they didn't let it get them down because they would soon find themselves in another high-profile feud back in TNA. This, of course, was the period when Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan had come into the promotion, with the Hulkster bringing along some of his friends with him in the form of the Nasty Boys. After that then, it didn't take long before the Dudleys would start a program with the incoming team, eventually defeating them in a tables match on the February 25th episode of Impact. Following this, and Brother Ray would once again begin to tease a singles run as he started a feud with Jesse Neal. He would still remain aligned with Devon for the time being, of course, but this would ultimately represent the direction he would soon be headed in, one which would completely revitalize his character. Before that, however, he would become a key player in TNA's ECW tribute show, Hardcore Justice: The Last Stand, joining up with other ECW alumni on the roster to put on a final farewell to the old promotion on August 8, 2010. After that, the old Philadelphia crew would even remain together for a while as a new stable named EV 2.0, feuding with Ric Flair's fortune over the course of the next few weeks, up until the point that Team 3D were removed from television following the expiration of their contracts. A couple of months later, Team 3D returned to TV to announce that they had decided to retire instead of signing a new contract, but that before they did, they'd agreed to one more match, with this taking place at November 7, 2010's Turning Point against the Motor City Machine Guns. And after losing that match, they would appear on the following week's episode of Impact for a special retirement ceremony. Of course, this all turned out to be a ruse, however, because during the ceremony, Brother Ray would turn heel on Devon, lambasting him for being the weak one of the group and announcing that he was going out on his own from then on in as a singles star. After that, the two would feud for a while with Bully Ray, as he was now calling himself, more often than not coming out on top, all until the whole thing was abruptly dropped, that was, when the Queens native decided to join up with a new family in the form of Immortal. And it was this alignment that ultimately saw him fully move up to main event level, as he now found himself working alongside the likes of Ric Flair, AJ Styles, and Matt Hardy in a number of multi-man matches. It all eventually saw his stock rise so high, in fact, on the April 28th episode of Impact that year, he would get a chance to challenge Sting for the TNA World title. And although he would lose this thanks to interference from his heated rival Styles, it showed he was ready to step up to that next level, something he would continue to prove as he went on to beat the Phenomenal One a couple of months later at Slammiversary. Following this, Ray entered the 2011 Bound for Glory series, hoping to earn another world title shot by winning it. Unfortunately though, Lady Luck would not be on his side here as, while he did put on an impressive showing, he would fall short by the end, with this only serving to motivate him even more as he from there on went on to align himself with the, at the time, TNA champion Bobby Roode, keeping himself close to the ultimate prize and waiting for the moment where he could finally strike at it. And while waiting for this moment, he would get involved in a program with Austin Aries in the intervening time, with both men battling it out on multiple occasions over the course of the spring of 2012 before Ray then moved on to a brief feud with Abyss. Sadly, however, neither of these saw the former tag team champion able to re-establish himself as a top contender, and so, realizing he needed to make a change, he began the process of turning face once more when he joined up with a collective of TNA superstars who had come together to fend off the invading Aces and Eights stable, Eric Bischoff's latest attempt to replicate the success of the NWO angle from years prior. And while at first it may have felt like Bully Ray was just a side character in this whole storyline, he eventually became one of its most prominent aspects after getting a personal blessing from Hulk Hogan to team up with Sting at October 14th's Bound for Glory to take down the Invaders once and for all. On that night, however, the babyfaces would fail, and to make matters worse, it would be revealed not long after this that Devon had joined up with Aces and Eights too, this leading to the two brothers once again feuding for a while thereafter. Following on from there, and tension began to grow between Bully Ray and Hulk Hogan when it was revealed that the latter was having a secret relationship with the Hulkster's daughter Brooke. This all ended up resulting in Hogan suspending both of them on the January 3, 2013 episode of Impact, with Ray countering this by proposing to his secret lover and setting the wedding date for 2 weeks later. When the wedding came though, the boy from Queen's groomsman, Taz, would ruin the proceedings when he too revealed himself to be a member of Aces and Eights, this leading to Hogan reinstating Ray and naming him #1 contender to the TNA World title, setting him up to face Jeff Hardy at March 10th's Lockdown pay-per-view. And it was at Lockdown that finally, after so many years of waiting, Bully Ray was able to climb to the top of the mountain when he beat Hardy to become a singles world champion for the first time in his career, all before immediately revealing his secret plan as he let the world know that he'd been the leader of Aces and Eights all along, with the whole thing being a ploy to put him back in the world title picture. So now, fully leaning to his heel side, he went on a string of successful title defenses over the summer, going through the likes of Sting, Chris Sabin, and Mr. Anderson as he established himself as a true main event presence. Come the autumn of that year, however, things would begin to fall apart as not only would Bully Ray lose his TNA World title to AJ Styles, but would also lose a match to Mr. Anderson, with a pre-bout stipulation meaning that as a result of this, Aces and Eights were forced to disband entirely. And so, with no one to back him up anymore, the former world champion had to reassess his position in the company, something which became clearer when TNA President Dixie Carter cost him a match against Bobby Roode not long thereafter, this leading to the two feuding over the next few months as Ray became the company's new Steve Austin-like character, fighting off the Authority and promising that, before the whole thing was said and done, he would put Dixie through a table. And on August 7th of that year, he would finally succeed in doing this, writing Dixie off TV for a while, as it was then announced that both he and Devon would be part of that year's TNA Hall of Fame class. After that, though, the two would end up leaving the company when their contracts ran out, with Ray making a surprise appearance at the 2015 Royal Rumble just a few months later. And of course, this one-off would end up opening all the necessary doors and eventually lead to the Dudleys making their triumphant return on the August 24, 2015 episode of Raw, helping to put over teams such as The New Day and the Usos, all while giving fans a nice bit of nostalgia every time the tables were brought out. That said, by summer of 2016, this run would have ended. Initially, there had been plans for Bubba to turn heel and run with his Bully Ray character for a while at this point, but before any of that could make it to TV, Vince McMahon reportedly got cold feet, not wanting to push anyone with the name Bully on his PG show. So with the idea scrapped then, the Dudleys left WWE behind, returning to the indie circuit a few times over the next couple of years before going their separate ways once more when Devon took a producer's job with McMahon, and Bully Ray instead decided to sign up with Ring of Honor. Of course, in the mid-2000s, Ring of Honor had been considered the mecca of independent wrestling, a place that had birthed the likes of Daniel Bryan, CM Punk, Kevin Steen, and countless others. By that point, however, with so many other options available, the promotion's star had waned somewhat, and so when the former tag team champion came on board, he did so with the intention of trying to reinvigorate it and help it find its place in this new wrestling landscape. And over the next 3 years, he would do a fairly good job at this, with Ring of Honor's reputation growing once again as they carved out a solid spot for themselves in amongst the likes of Impact, NWA, New Japan, and AEW. Come February of 2018 then, feeling he'd done everything he could do, Bully Ray would formally announce his retirement from the ring, with both he and Devon being rewarded for their years of service to the industry just 1 month later when they were inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. After that, he remained an occasional on-screen presence for ROH up until his contract ran out in April of 2020, but since then, he's remained mostly absent. Will he make a return at some point? It's possible. With the mic skills he has, he'd certainly make a great manager, but all that remains speculation for now. What's important is that after a career that spanned more than 2 decades, he can sleep soundly in the knowledge that he's done just about everything someone can do in the wrestling industry, particularly in the tag division, where you can make a solid argument he was part of the greatest team of all time. This making him an absolute legend forever and one that will never be forgotten. Well guys, what did you think of the video? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, as well as follow Wrestle with Andy on Instagram and Twitter. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.